Well, welcome to Debbie's Back Porch. So glad to have you with us. Tonight I'm going to make gnocchi. Yes, you've probably heard it pronounced differently, as have I, but it's gnocchi, and I'm going to show you my favorite recipe for sauce with gnocchi. You can pause, hear the ingredients, write them down, and hey, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it. You know, I think a lot of people don't make gnocchi because once they make it, they don't know how to tell people what it is. I've pronounced it wrong most of my life, but for the video, I looked it up because I think that's important. So it's gnocchi, it's not gnocchi, it's not gnocchi, it's not gnocchi. Anyway, well, let's start with some potatoes, and I have 3 potatoes here that I have baked. Baked them earlier today, and you want to bake them done. I did an hour and 25 minutes at 425, and I let them cool. You don't have to let them cool this long, but you want to let them get fairly cool because we're going to put an egg in them. So I just cut them and scoop them out. You can peel the potato if you'd rather do it that way. I just scoop them out, and I'm going to measure these as we go because I just guessed, but we want about 2 cups. The way you figure portions on this is how much potato would you eat? That's how much gnocchi you want. I figure 2 cups is about enough for 3 or 4 people, but you know that'll vary depending on who's a big eater and who is a light eater. So we've got close to 2 cups here, and you know, if you had a potato ricer, you would use a potato ricer now. I don't have one, so I'm going to show you how I do it. And you know, if I made this more often, I would buy a potato ricer, but this is one of those dishes that's high carb, high fat, high protein. Whatever diet you're on, this isn't on it. So I only make it 3 or 4 times a year. So I'm going through it with a fork, and I'm going to pull out any spots that seem tough. And that's important because you don't want any chunks of potato in your gnocchi when you're done. So I'm just going to mash it up really well. Folks can get a little persnickety about how they make gnocchi, but you know, there are really no hard and fast rules. You just want a soft, tender potato that's a little dry because we're going to make it into a pasta or a dumpling, so you want it dry. That's why we don't chop them up and boil them. We either bake them or you can do it in the microwave as long as you get them done all the way through. So I'm beating up 1 egg. If I had 4 cups of potatoes, I'd beat up 2 eggs. So for every 2 cups, we're going to add an egg. Some people use just the yolk. I use the whole egg. I can't see that it makes any difference. Just mix it up into your potatoes really, really well. And about a teaspoonful of salt. And you know, that's really not very much for 3 whole potatoes. And it'll make a world of difference in the taste. You know what I say about salt. Salt it when you're cooking it. And then people won't salt at the table. And overall, they'll be eating less salt and enjoying their food more. I have here about a ½ cup of flour. I'm not telling you exactly how much flour because we'll determine as we go along, but about a ½ cup is what we're going to end up using. So I'm going to put it in a little bit at a time and get my hands in it. And you're really going to have to get your hands in it. It'd be hard to mix it up otherwise. And a couple of things to remember about this process. One is you don't want to use too much flour. That's why we're adding it a little bit at a time. But we've got to get it to a certain texture so that it'll hold together. So we'll add as much as we need and no more than that. The other is that while you do have to work this, you want to work it no more than absolutely necessary. And you're going to see me really kneading it later. But I don't need it any more than I have to. So you're looking for a texture here stiffer than mashed potatoes because we want this to hold together. And I don't know any way to describe it to you except you want it to be thick. And if you made mashed potatoes like this, you'd probably throw them away. That'd be too thick and starchy. But you've got to have it hold together. So I'm adding just a little at a time, and it's going to take almost the ½ cup. and it'll vary based on how much moisture was in your potatoes. So see, this sticks together and it's a little gummy, but we're using the flour to bind up the moisture in the mix here. So I'm going to add just a little bit more and work that in, and I think we're about there. And I don't know how to tell you how the feel is. You'll just have to try it a couple of times. Better to be a little thicker than thinner. So I've got a piece of parchment paper here, and I'm spreading it liberally with flour, and I've measured out another ½ cup. I'm not using my dough cloth because this is just too wet and gummy and it'll mess it up. So just dump this out, this batter. See, you wouldn't serve that for mashed potatoes. Dump it out into plenty of flour, and we're going to start the kneading. And it's probably going to take most of the other ½ cup. So let's cover it well, make sure our hands are covered well, and then just dive right in. And I'm going to knead it and add the flour until it's dry enough to handle it without it sticking to your hands and sticking to your knife. And I don't know how to tell you how long that's going to be because it's going to vary. Experience will tell you when to stop. But I want to tell you, don't let this scare you. It's really hard to get it wrong. People will get very persnickety about the texture you're supposed to have. If you put a little bit too much flour, it'll change the texture a little bit. They'll still be good. You know, I sometimes think folks get a little elitist about cooking, and they will describe it to you as being very difficult and very delicate. And that can just take all the fun out of cooking. You know, cooking's supposed to be fun, and if it's just something that ties your nerves in knots, you'll end up not doing it, and that would be a shame. So I'm working this, just keep on until it doesn't stick to your paper, doesn't stick to your hands. It's dry enough to hold together when we drop it in hot water. This one's just about there. And this is not like your bread dough. It's not ever going to get elastic. You're just wanting it to be dry enough that the flour binds with the potatoes and holds it together. So, see, I'm not being very careful with it, but I don't think it's overworked either. So when we get it to that consistency that we want, I'm going to cut it into 3 or 4 sections so that I can work with those better to make the actual gnocchi. And I'm actually going to take the time to let you just watch for a few minutes so you can see the texture that I'm going for. You can see how it leaves a handprint, and it's firm enough to hold up to my hands working it. And you know, that's about what we want. So I'm going to cut it into thirds so that I can work with the smaller batches. And don't forget to flour your knife or the potato will stick to it. See? So now I'm going to start rolling. We want to roll this into a long, skinny piece. About maybe a little bit bigger than my thumb. And you just keep rolling it. Roll, go from the inside out. And it'll just get longer and skinnier. And you know, if it's sticking, if you can't handle it like that, you see I can pick it up and move it around. Then stop, add some more flour, knead it a little bit more. But this is about right. It's strong enough to hold up to me moving it around. Now we want to cut these pretty close to the same size. It really isn't critical, but you want to get them as close to the same size as you can. And the way I do that is I measure one section of my thumb and just move it along, and that way I'm going to get all of them pretty close to the same size. And while chefs all over the internet tell you one shape is perfect and one is not, I don't think it matters as long as they're the same size. If you have a gnocchi paddle, you can use that to put little indentations in it. I'm going to use a fork and get little indentations in it, but you don't even really have to do that. Some people put a thumbprint in it and make it bend over, looks like a little clamshell. I have done that. Just make them into a shape that pleases your eye, and they'll be fine as long as you started with the same amount of dough. You truly could just drop them in this sort of semi-square shape and they'd be fine. So let me show you here what I've got. See, I've got little rectangles and I've got the indentation of a fork in there, and the theory is that that will help it hold the sauce better. Here's my final product. I'm gonna let them sit here uncovered, unchilled. They'll dry out just a little bit while I get everything else ready to go. Now, if your goal with this video was just to learn how to make gnocchi and cook it, we're almost done. But I'm gonna show you the sauce that I like with the gnocchi, and you can use really any pasta sauce you like. I've got a big pot of water here, way more than you think you need. I'm sprinkled in some salt and a little bit of oil, and we want to get it to a rolling boil. While the water's coming to a boil, I'm going to start the sauce. This is my 10-inch Wagner cast iron skillet. I'm going to drizzle just a little bit of olive oil in here. It's maybe 2-3 tablespoons full. Just enough to help this pancetta brown. This is pancetta. It's an Italian style bacon. Comes in a 4-ounce package. Kind of hard to find sometimes. I found this at the Publix. My Kroger doesn't have it. But 4 ounces is plenty. Even if you were making a bigger dish, 4 ounces is plenty. It's a little bit salty. So I'm going to dump it into this pan, and you'll see I've got a fish spatula here, and I'm using it for a specific reason that I'll show you in a minute. So I've got this on a medium-high heat. I want it to crackle and start to get brown, and then we'll go from there. And this is how you cook the gnocchi. You have a lot of water because you don't want it to get too cool while you're adding the noodles, the gnocchi. So I'm dropping it in to start with, just 1 or 2 pieces at a time. I want to make sure that the water stays at a good boil, or at least a high simmer. And as I add them, if any of them stick to the bottom, I just loosen them with this spatula. And as I go along, I'll add more and more at a time. But when I start to lose my boil, I stop until it comes back up. That's the one thing that's very, very important, is you gotta have your water boiling or your gnocchi will come apart no matter how much flour you put in it. So we're going to add it a little more at a time now, and I will occasionally reach down and jog it loose from the bottom. See, we're keeping our boil, and as I go, I'll add more and more at a time. And you don't have to set a timer for this like you do with most pasta. It'll tell you when it's done. It'll float. And even though I'm putting them in a little bit at a time, it won't be overcooked. You're just going to cook it until it all floats. And I'm making sure that it's loosened from the bottom so that it can float when it gets done. So you see there, it's starting to float. About another minute. Let's turn our attention over here to the pancetta. And I'm going to loosen it up and make sure that it's nice and crunchy. And it is. See, you know, and this stuff smells so good. Now I'm moving it out of the way. I'm making kind of a hole in the middle, and I'll show you why I'm doing that just 1 second. So see, it's floating now, and it's done. So we're going to take a little extra step here. I'm going to pan fry in that yummy fat that rendered out of the pancetta. So I'm taking them right out of the pot, draining them a little bit, and moving them over to the frying pan. Now you don't have to do this step if you just want to put some marinara sauce on here, if you want to put a cheese sauce, a butter sauce, but really the pan frying adds a lot to the flavor. So just pile them in, and they are sturdy enough now and firm enough that we can stir them around and play with them a little bit, and they'll stay together. And we just want to get some nice browning on these. My heat's on medium-high, by the way, and I may have to turn it down. But the flavor that's coming from this rendered fat into the gnocchi, which, you know, is a little bland, actually. Potatoes are a little bland unless they have something added to them. You know, if you order gnocchi at a restaurant, if they pan fry them for the recipe that you're getting, they'll usually tell you on the menu, because not all gnocchi is pan fried when you order it out somewhere. But this is just a little added touch, and I'm adding 2 pats of butter. I had 2 cups of potatoes, 2 pats of butter. I'm adding the butter because this is going to be a creamy sauce, even though I'm not adding any cream. It's based on spaghetti alla carbonara, which is thickened with the pasta water and eggs. And I'll show you how I'm going to put those eggs in here in a minute. So here are my eggs. I'm going to beat them up really well, and then I'm going to temper them, and I'll show you how I do that. I'm taking a big scoop of the hot pasta water and mixing it in very slowly, and this will prevent it from turning into scrambled eggs when I add it to the hot pan. Now I'm adding a ½ cup of cheese, and I usually use Romano or Parmigiano, but I had some nice asiago cheese, and I'm going to use it this time. You just don't want to use a really moist cheese, like cheddar wouldn't work. I don't know, it might work, but it would be different. So I'm moving the gnocchi out of the way so that I've got a little space there to stir, to whisk, and I'm slowly adding the egg and cheese mixture in. Got my heat down a little bit, by the way, medium to medium low, and I'm just going to incorporate that in pretty slowly. And when you get it all incorporated in, then we'll mix the gnocchi and the pancetta and everything in together. You see how sturdy those are now? And see how rich and creamy that looks. I actually think I want it to be just a little more liquid, so I'm going to add another scoop of the pasta water in, and then we'll taste to see what we've got. And you know, this is just really your preference. You can leave it thicker if you want to. So now let's taste it. I don't think it's going to need any salt because I salted the gnocchi, I salted the water, and I'm right, it doesn't need any salt. We do need to add some pepper though, and a lot of it. This dish depends on the pepper. And while you may know that I usually prefer red pepper flakes, in this dish I'm going to put a whole tablespoonful of freshly ground black pepper. It just sets off the flavor, and really it's necessary in this dish. And just because I want to, I'm going to add a big old pinch of my dried rosemary from my herb garden. And you know, basil would be good too. I just think rosemary and potatoes are a really nice fit. So let's let this come back to a simmer and plate it up, show you what I got. Now I'm serving this in a plate as a main dish. We're going to cover it in some grated cheese. This is the asiago. And then I'm going to, I'm going to put a little parsley on top. Gnocchi is often served as a side dish. You can serve it just in butter and a little garlic, or whatever you want as a side dish. Just think of it as pasta or as a dumpling. I guess really what it is a potato dumpling. No mystery to that at all. And I'm going to show you a close-up of this wonderful stuff. I love gnocchi, and you know, I don't eat a lot of pasta, but this is a pasta worth spending your carbs on. It's still kind of hot, but I'm going to give it a taste, and then I'll let you know if it turned out wonderful or so-so. Now you knew I was kidding. This turns out wonderful every time. And I want to cut into one of these gnocchi and show you the texture. They are dense like pasta and almost creamy inside like a dumpling. You should give this a shot. They're pretty easy. Easier to make than to say. So give gnocchi, gnocchi, gnocchi a try. And I think by this recipe, you'll be so happy you did. Thank you for joining us on Debbie's Back Porch. Hope to see you again tomorrow.